Welcome to another fantastic episode of AP Computer Science.
Are you ready to take some awesome notes on today's topic?
Inheritance is a technique that allows you to define a very general class and then later define more specialized classes based upon it. You can do this by adding some new capabilities to the existing class or changing the way the existing methods work. Inheritance allows you to define a new class based on a class that already exists. This new class will inherit the characteristics of the existing class, but also provides additional capabilities. This makes programming easier because you can reuse your previous code.
It also allows for something called polymorphism, which will be covered in a later video.
The class that is used as a basis for defining a new class is called a superclass, or a parent class, or even a base class depending on who you're talking to. The new class based on a superclass is called a subclass, or a child class, or a derived class. Isn't CompSci not confusing and very straightforward?
Seriously though, CompSci usually has at least two names for everything because the military and schools were working on same concepts at the same time.
The subclass inherits characteristics from one parent class. It's called single inheritance. This fancy diagram shows a superclass and a subclass. The line between them shows the is-a relationship. The diagram is read as, a student is a person. The boxes show that the student class is a subclass of the person class. Inheritance is between classes, not objects. A superclass is a blueprint for a new object. That newly constructed object is another blueprint that looks much like the original, but with added features. The subclass can be used to construct objects that look like the superclass's objects, but with additional capabilities. This fancy-smancy diagram shows a superclass and a subclass, and some objects that have been constructed from each. These objects are actual instances of the class. In the picture, Albert Einstein, René Brook, and Mike Vista represent actual objects. In each class hierarchy, there is at most one superclass, but it might have several subclasses. There is one class at the top of the hierarchy that has no superclass. This collection of lines shows the hierarchy of classes. It shows that the principal is a person, a student is a person, and that a teacher is a person. It also shows that both a high school student and college student are types of student. In the example, the class person is the base class, and the classes principal, student, teacher, high school student, and college student are derived classes. The syntax for deriving a child class from a parent class is class, subclass, extends, superclass. In Java, every class that does not specifically extend another class is a subclass of the class object. For example, the person class extends the class object, and a small number of methods that make sense for all objects, such as the toString method. But the object implementations of these methods are not very useful, and the implementations usually get redefined in classes lower in the hierarchy. The following program uses a class person to represent people you might find in a school. The person class has basic information in it, such as name and age. An additional class student is created that is similar to person. It has an ID number and a grade point average of the student. The student class is a derived class of person. An object of type student contains myIdNum and myGPA, which are defined in student. It also has indirect access to private variables such as my name and my age, from the person through the methods getName, getAge, setName, and setAge, that inherits from the person. The constructor for the student class initializes the instance data of the student objects and uses the person's class's constructor to initialize the data of the person's superclass. The statement superNameAge invokes the person class's constructor to initialize inherited data from the superclass. The next two statements initialize the members that only student has. When the super is used in the constructor, it must be the first statement. So far, we've only seen public, class members that can be accessed outside of the class, and private, class members that are inaccessible from the outside of the class, access modifiers. There is a third access modifier that can be applied for an instance variable or method. If it is declared as protected, it can be used in the class in which it is defined and any subclass of that class. This declaration is less restrictive than private, but more than public. It is preferred that all instance variables are private. Indirect access from subclasses can be done with the public getter and setter methods. While protected members are available to provide a foundation for the subclasses to be built on, they are still invisible to the public. A subclass can override a method from its parent's class by defining a replacement method with the same signature. For example, our student subclass, the two-string method, in the person superclass does not reference the new variables that have been added to the object student, so there's nothing new printed out. We need a new two-string method in the class student. A more efficient alternative is to use super to invoke the two-string method from the parent class while adding information that is unique to the student subclass. Even though the base class has a two-string method, the new definition of the two-string in the derived class will override the parent's version. The parent has its method and the derived class has its own method with the same name. With the change in the student class, the following program will print out the full information for both items. The line Bob two-string calls the two-string method defined in person, and the line Elizabeth two-string calls the two-string method defined in student. An interface is a mechanism that unrelated objects use to interact with each other. Like a protocol, an interface specifies agreed-on behaviors or attributes.
This may seem kind of pointless, but becomes glaringly obvious why this is a good thing later, when we cover polymorphism.
The person class and its class hierarchy define the attributes and behaviors of a person, but a person can interact with the world in other ways. For example, an employment program can manage a person at a school. An employment program isn't concerned with the kinds of items it handles as long as each item provides certain information, such as salary and employee ID. This interaction is enforced as a protocol of the method definitions contained within an interface. An employable interface would define, would not implement, methods that set and get the salary, assign an ID number, and so on. To work in the employment program, the teacher class must agree to this protocol by implementing the interface. To implement an interface, the class must implement all of the methods and attributes defined in the interface. In our example, the shared methods of the employable interface will be implemented in the teacher class. An interface consists of a set of methods without any associated implementations. A class implements an interface by defining all attributes and methods defining the interface. Implements is a reserved word. A class can implement any number of interfaces. In fact, a class can both extend another class and implement one or more interfaces.
Interfaces are useful for the following: declaring a common set of methods that one or more classes are required to implement, providing access to an object's programming interface without revealing the details of its class, and finally, providing a relationship between dissimilar classes without imposing an unnatural class relationship. You won't need to write your own interfaces until you get to the point of writing fairly complex programs. Good luck, code well.